You know, the difference between a scientist and a metaphysician, a true metaphysician in the Platonic sense, is a scientist. Scientists think that this is science, this is physics, and this is metaphysics. They're like two different things. And of course, people that actually have wisdom know that that's not the case. I mean, they're looking at both sides of the coin, but a true person of wisdom, a true metaphysician, know that there's not a head and a tail side of a coin. There's only the silver that makes up the coin. There's no such thing as a head or a tail. This is all the silver of the coin. There's actually an ancient metaphysical analogy talking about the silver of the coinage, meaning you're not interested in the head or the tail. You're interested in the ultimate reality of what the hell is, because people are always interested in dissecting appearances rather than the substrate. It is the case, and I'm actually going to interject photography into this, because everything in the universe is divinely simple. Human beings, of course, of inferior minds are always trying to complicate things. They're trying to dissect things and make things more complicated than they are. Let's just take, and I'm going to get to hatred here in a second. This video is about hatred and how it's absolutely identical to magnetism. Talk about force and motion, the creation or the perpetual creation, exhaustion of force of one's spirit. Spiritus sanctum, referred to the chitta or the nous or the mind. We don't actually have a distinction, unfortunately, in English between consciousness and mind. They're both meant existentially one and the same thing. However, the ancient Greek and Indian and Egyptian metaphysicians actually knew that these were two different things. One was the consubstantial consciousness, and one was the ontological self. All branches of metaphysics always refer to two selves. One, the psychophysical self, or in the ancient Pali, the namarupic self, i.e. the psychophysical self of forms, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness, or in the ancient Pali, rupa, vedana, sana, sankara, and vijnana. And this, of course, would be the aggregated self, i.e. the psychophysical self. But specifically, like relational to photography, what actually makes up a good image, without actually dissecting it to the core. This is no different than the fundamental principles of field theory, because everything in the universe, i.e. Mother Nature, and we say Mother Nature as a euphemism for referring to ultimate reality, not referenced any religion, because I have no interest in religion. Religion is secularized metaphysics. If you don't know what secularized metaphysics is, then you might want to look that up. Basically, it means dumbed down metaphysics. Like in photography, a good image, it will either stop you, or you'll actually be drawn into it or repulsed away from it. Ultimately, the net value, whether that's attractive or whether it's repulsive, is good as far as a good photographic image. A really good image will either stop you, you will be impelled towards, or repulsed away from it. I mean, really great images, they can either be ones that draw you in or actually push you away. The fundamental nature of human consciousness and the images that actually make up the best images and awards throughout all of history have always had the same ultimate value. Whether that be a +2 or a -2 makes no difference. Whether that impels you towards or repulses you away, like say war photography, you know, horrific images, like these are great images. Like, yeah, but no one wants to stare at that because it's like a really horrific image. It doesn't matter. It's still a great image. People don't seem to get that the best imagery in photography, it makes no difference. You talk about the ultimate metaphysics of what makes up a good image, either pulls you in or pushes you away. The same is true of hatred. Everything in the human consciousness and what we actually find attractive or repulsive in life is fundamentally the same. Everything is force and motion, inertia and acceleration. Same difference between magnetism and dielectricity. There's no such thing as a force of gravity. Gravity is not a force, nor does gravity exist. That which we call gravity is incoherent dielectric acceleration. The same thing that idiots call magnetic attraction, and there's no such thing as magnetic attraction. It's actually dielectric acceleration, whether that be coherent dielectric acceleration or incoherent or point non-specific dielectric acceleration, or what we call gravity. None of those things are obviously forces. When it comes to hatred, they say, well, hatred will burn you up, and of course hatred is evil. Hatred fundamentally is evil. The reason why hatred is evil is the fundamental nature of consciousness and the field theory that makes up the spiritus sanctum, or I don't care what word you use. I mean, human beings, of course, are always using concepts and debating concepts, and I'm not interested in logomachy. That's another neat word everybody should learn, logomachy, debating words. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the ether, doesn't matter if we're talking about zero-point energy, doesn't matter if we're talking about counter space. All of these things are just reference to one and the same thing, fundamental reality or non-Cartesian potential. All hatred is fundamentally the exhaustion of the nature of consciousness, such that we're actually burning energy, not energy of the psychophysical self, but of the ontological self. Hatred requires literally stoking the fires of one's energy. Love, however, does not. This doesn't mean we should love evil people, but that's obviously a matter for another discussion. But hatred is exactly like magnetism. We use the term magnetism, but magnetism, saying magnetism and saying force and saying create space is all one and the same thing. Space is not a thing, of course. Space has no properties, as Nikola Tesla famously said. I don't know if it's famously said, because most people don't know that Nikola Tesla did say that, but he certainly did. Are all one and the same thing. We're talking about the exhaustion of energy, the dissipation of energy, which makes one weak. It always is the case that people that operate or have a modus operandi vis-a-vis hatred, they may become, over a short period of time, extremely powerful. Like the release of an enormous amount of energy is like, wow, that's power. Like, no, that's the impotency of power. They will literally, as the ancient saying goes, burn themselves out. In other words, when actually someone exhibits and continues to exhibit hatred in their life, all through their life, either directed at one thing or many things, they will, of course, burn themselves out. They must, by definition, burn themselves out. We live in the world of antinomies. I mean, we have fat people, skinny people, ugly people, pretty people. This is the world of antinomies, i.e. polarity. Anything that partakes of phenomena partakes of the antinomies. This was the wisdom known by the ancient Greeks as well as the ancient Egyptians and the ancient Indians. So we also always have envy, lust, hatred. Lust, of course, is not the same thing as love. And the old word would be agape. However, I hate to refer to that particular language and using the term agape. I'm not talking about love in the conventional sense, or like lust. We're talking about true seeing yourself within another. Talking about true compassion, but not compassion in the generic or superficial or existential sense as we understand compassion, but in the true metaphysical sense of seeing, the nature of who you are within the nature of other people. Obviously, hatred itself is, will burn you out. There are people that attain to great power, by destroying others, whether literally or figuratively or both, but that can never last. I mean, that is the nature of the universe, is that these people can't last. We don't ever have to worry about people that, that generate hatred, because while it may last for a few years, or even a few months, or maybe even a decade, it can't last. The universe is always self-correcting. And while we'll actually have like a rogue wave, like sailors die on the sea, their biggest fear is, this enormous wave that will actually come along and sweep the boats and end up killing everybody. We do have these rogue waves of hatred in the collective consciousness of humanity all throughout history, where people think, oh my God, like World War II, we had like a rogue wave of hatred, of decimation, of countless millions we thought was never going to end. Well, the universe is always self-correcting. It can't go on like that. It's absolutely impossible. But that's also true on a personal sense, is that nobody should burn themselves out. I mean, you shouldn't worry about the ignorance and stupidity of others. No one, no matter how powerful they were vis-a-vis, their physical prowess or their kinglyship, whether they, were king of countless countries or even, the greater part of the known world, or they're powerful via wisdom, the wisest people that have ever lived throughout history. Nobody's drastically affected the world. I mean, and nor should they. And the world is always self-correcting. The polarization and the antinomies of human ignorance are undeniable, and they are unconquerable. They are absolutely unconquerable. That doesn't mean one need to be entirely selfish, but I mean, ultimately, it is the case that self-liberation, or suvimutta chittasa, as the ancient Pali saying goes, is of ultimate importance, because you can help a few people along the way, but first you have to be able to help yourself. But hatred will certainly get you nowhere fast. I mean, it'll get you somewhere. I mean, there are people that actually have risen to power and to fame and to wealth and prosperity for a short period of time with hatred. violence and aggressiveness towards others, whether that be corporate or personal or otherwise, and we say, oh, that's how I'm going to get ahead in the world. I'm going to be like this hard-ass SOB, like, the New York schmuck driving his Lamborghini that, like, crushes other businesses, and, he lives to chew the ass out of anyone and everyone who gets in his way. It's like, that person will succeed for a short period of time, but hatred is exactly like magnetism. It is the expenditure of energy which cannot, no matter how powerful or rich someone is, cannot last very long. It can't. It will actually end up causing physical damage, and then everything will just fall back to zero again. So we don't have to worry about people like that. They are self-correcting. Nature is always self-correcting. You only push Mother Nature so far, whether that be personal or otherwise, before it always snaps back into a hysteresis. There's a great word everybody should learn, is hysteresis. Into a hysteresis of the system. It is absolutely amazing. One of the most fundamental principles of understanding a lot of stuff, and I do, whether you think that's a really arrogant statement or not, I really don't care. But I do understand a lot of things fundamentally vis-a-vis the arena of metaphysics, and it is absolutely amazing how everything is mirrored within everything else, and the ultimate simplicity of everything is irreducible and so divinely simple. It's beyond beautiful. I can actually sit back and, better than any movie or better than any harp music that I've listened to, and I love harp music. I can actually picture within my mind how magnetism works, and the simplex geometry, and understanding what polarity is, and incommensurability, and understanding what force and motion, inertia and acceleration is, and understanding. And I didn't laugh for many years. I laughed at Walter Russell's idea that light doesn't travel. Well, it turns out Walter Russell was right. Light does not travel. There's no such thing as anything emitting light. It is a field perturbation. And the so-called C, or speed of light, is not a speed, it's actually a rate of induction. Understanding how fundamentally everything that humanity understands about field theory is so absolutely absurd and insane. It's so beautiful. Fundamentally, at its very core, the very root of all of this stuff is mirrored in everything else, and it is undeniably simple. It is really no different than understanding the nature of force and motion, inertia and acceleration, and pressure mediation. I had some people say, what was pressure mediation? I mean, it's like, really? I mean, that's about as fundamental as it gets. But I mean, there's not physics versus metaphysics. There's not field theory versus photography. All of this stuff is if you actually understand the absolute core and root of all of this stuff, it is so divinely simple. Famously so, I mean, like even our phenomena world, which we think is so complex, it is irreducibly simplex. The most fundamental particle, and I've never denied particles, but there's only one particle. The fundamental particle, of course, is the hydrogen atom, but it is the case, and you could look this up if you don't believe me, like a free neutron, within, I think it's like 17 point whatever minutes will turn into a proton. So there's only fundamentally, and by the way, Tesla, Oliver Heaviside, James Clerk Maxwell, and Charles Proteus Steinmetz, they all said the same. These were the gods of electrical theory. These were there's no chance in hell that anybody out there, no matter how smart you are, whatever your PhD in electrical engineering, you're not smarter than them, much less collectively. They all said the same thing. There's no such goddamn thing as an electron. This is a abstract concept. This notion of a photon particle is also equally absurd. There's no such goddamn thing as a light particle. It's a misunderstanding and misappropriation of the fundamental nature of light, which is a coaxial circuit. Longitudinal dielectric pulse perturbations with corresponding electrical and magnetic transverse perturbations, which actually make up the circuit of a transverse electrical magnetism. That there's only one particle in the universe. We know that neutrons become protons if they're free within 17 minutes. There's only one fundamental particle. And Walter Russell, by the way, discovered. Yeah, I think Walter Russell discovered Walter Russell got a lot of stuff wrong, but he got a lot of stuff right. He discovered 6 fundamental elements before they were ever discovered, simply by, and you can look up Walter Russell's elemental chart, do a Google search on that, by showing that he understood that the elements followed this harmonic. And by actually tracing this harmonic, Walter Russell determined, and you can look this up, this is all true, that there should be an element here and here and here and here that have not yet been discovered. Walter Russell discovered deuterium before it was ever discovered, and several other fundamental elements, simply by understanding that all elements follow this harmonic. And brilliant on his part. He never defined a field, by the way. There's a lot of stuff he did get wrong. He actually confused electricity with dielectricity. He never defined a field. He never truly defined magnetism. He did discover a lot of stuff about magnetism, which is accurate, but he did get a lot of stuff wrong. But that's fine. I mean, his accuracy rate is incredibly high. But all of this is interconnected. The interconnectivity of everything, there's not like two branches of science, like metaphysics is here, physics is over here. It's like, no, it's not. All of this is just one single thing. The irreducible simplicity of everything. There's not, we're talking about looking for the grand unified theory of electricity and magnetism and dielectricity and gravity. Well, gravity doesn't exist. It's just a misappropriation of the misunderstanding of the nature of point non-specific dielectric acceleration. What we call magnetic attraction and what we call gravity are one and the same goddamn thing. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Magnetism is the release of inertia. Defined dielectricity in releasing its energy manifests as magnetism. Electricity is phi times psi equals Q in Planck of electrification. Electricity literally is, and this is also a quote from Charles Proteus Steinmetz, electricity is a hybrid of dielectricity and magnetism. Period. End of story. No one's going to dispute that. It's impossible. So we are only left with two things, dielectricity and magnetism. And magnetism is merely the dielectric field. Humans, in their stupidity and agnosis and not understanding the fundamental cosmic mechanics, fail to realize that, like stupid little children, we're looking at these four different things, which are not four different things. Like a stupid child looks at water as one thing, steam as another, and ice as another. No, it's all one damn thing. It's water. Mother Nature does not need to be unified. It's already unified. It's humans' ignorance and stupidity that fails to comprehend, the interconnectivity and the simplicity of all these things. They're simplex, but not simple. Actually, they're both simple and simplex. Humanity is just not very intelligent in deciphering things. These are all different modalities of one and the same thing. And hatred, of course, is absolutely no different than magnetism. It's the expenditure of energy. This is why people burn themselves out with hatred, but you can't burn yourself out with love. But love is an incorrect word. I mean, you want to use the word agape, or you use the Pali or Sanskrit word or the ancient Greek word. Doesn't matter. We're talking about the same thing. We're not talking about love in the generic sense, like, oh, I love my wife, I love this, I love that. No, we're talking about metaphysical love, but love is still an incorrect term. This is English, unfortunately, has a lot of issues, and that the ancient Greek and Indian terminology did not have. Brilliantly, the ancient Pali word for empirical consciousness, i.e. vijnana, is the exact same word for ignorance, because ignorance is consubstantial to the psychophysical. Consciousness, i.e. ignorance, is consubstantial to the psychophysical. In other words, consciousness goes no further than the psychophysical. But in English, we don't differentiate out consciousness from mind. But in ancient metaphysics, those two things were completely and wholly different. But unfortunately, there is a lack of metaphysical nuance within the English distinguishing these two things, because they are absolutely distinguishable and very important. Differentiation exists, but this does not exist in our English language. So anyway, I digress. I could actually talk about this topic endlessly and go much deeper down the rabbit hole, but I think people's eyeballs would cross and they'd start to go like, what the hell is he talking about? I didn't understand him the first 5 minutes, now I really don't understand him. This is why the secrets of the universe are not secret. It's that they're unpenetrated by the minds of everyday humanity, because we're so busy walking around doing our jobs, paying the bills, worrying about feeding the cat and the dog. We busy ourselves the piss out. All that we never contemplate the big stuff. Yeah, we don't take the time to examine fundamental cosmic mechanics, because that stuff doesn't pay the bills, and therefore we just don't care about it. We weren't brought up to care about stuff like that. It's like busy, 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 work, job, pay the bills, busy, busy, work, job, pay the bills. You know, that kind of life sucks. I'm going to say it. Fuck that kind of life. You know? It's like, oh, God, I'm going to busy myself until the grave. Work, busy, job, 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 busy, busy, pay bills, busy, busy, busy. You know, what kind of life is that? That's the kind of life that everybody leads, but most everybody should not be leading. Doesn't mean you need to be a bum. It just means you need to be more contemplative and understand the fundamental stuff that's actually important. You know? Stuff that's really important. Whew. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you liked these videos. If you do, you click the link below. You can always help out because I'm not a schmuck or a shill selling anything, and anything really helps a lot. Especially since like tons of my videos have been demonetized, but that's kind of happened across the board on YouTube. So thank you and goodbye.